Vietnamese banks more open for EU investors under newly approved trade pact. And 10 years of efforts to seek for sweet fruit EVFTA. Hello and welcome to this edition of BizLine brought to you by VTV International. You're with me, Lina Phap, and as usual, we'll begin our program today by reviewing the economic highlights over the past week. Investors from the EU will have more opportunities to own higher stakes in Vietnamese banks than those from other countries under Vietnam's commitments in the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, or EVFTA. Under the EVFTA signed this week by the European Parliament, Vietnam and the EU have committed to facilitate the investment environment for businesses of both sides, in which the first will allow the latter's investors to enjoy an exception holding up to 49% charter capital at two Vietnamese banks. The offer will apply only to joint stock banks, excluding BIDV, Vietinbank, Vietcombank, and Agribank, in which the state still holds the controlling stakes. The offer will be valid for 5 years after the pact takes effect. The potential for Vietnam's wood industry in 2020 and beyond is still assessed to be wide open, especially since the Vietnam-EU Free Trade Agreement, or EVFTA, was approved. Europe is the third largest and stable growth rate export market of Vietnam after the US and Japan. The industry is set to reach export turnover of $20 billion by 2025, which means a doubling in value compared to 2019. This mission is completely possible if the country could take advantage of development opportunities. Wood and forest products of Vietnam are present in 140 countries and territories. However, export turnover only accounts for about 6% of the market share. The approved EVFTA is expected to boost Vietnam's wood exports in the near future. Textile and shoe companies are still facing difficulties due to their heavy dependence on imported raw materials and machinery. This is the problem that enterprises must solve in order to enjoy the recent ratification of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. Under the tariff reduction plan, most yarn and fabric products will be immediately exempted, while tariffs on garments will gradually decrease to 0% over 6 to 8 years. However, the EVFTA's impact will be marginal in the short term due to the limited capability of material autonomy. Vietnamese businesses need to increase their capacity to produce raw materials or build a production chain to meet the requirements on the origin of products in order to fully exploit the benefits brought about by the FTAs. Venture capital funding pouring into Vietnamese fintech companies accounted for 36% of the total fintech investment in Southeast Asia. The country has seen a soar in investment this year compared to 0.4% last year. This was stated in the Fintech in ASEAN report released by the United Overseas Bank, or UOB. Singapore took the leading position with 51%, down from 53% last year. Fintech companies are targeting about 300 million adults in Southeast Asia who do not have bank accounts or access to associated investment, credit, or insurance services. The Vietnamese mobile payment market is expected to reach $70.9 billion by 2025, up from $16 billion in 2016. China has carried out customs clearance for goods at Tân Thanh border gate, Lạng Sơn province. From Thursday, drivers must be fully equipped with protective clothing, including masks and gloves, and remain in the vehicles when clearing goods to China. Only freight vehicles which exported goods to China before and returned to Vietnam within the day are eligible for check-in. If a vehicle is on China's exit management system, the driver must register on the system 1 day in advance. Time to complete the procedures is from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Vietnam time. Since the outbreak of the new strain of acute respiratory disease or COVID-19, many countries have been warning their citizens against traveling to certain nations and territories in Asia, thus greatly affected the tourism industry in the region. Despite that, tourist destinations, heritage sites, and restaurants in Hanoi are safe destinations to international visitors. Numerous measures were implemented to minimize the potential spread of the virus and to ensure the safety of visitors. After temporarily closing to spray disinfectants, many relic sites and tourist attractions are now open to welcome visitors. Tourists are provided with masks and are advised to strictly follow regulations to protect themselves as well as others. In addition, owners of local tourist accommodation establishments have upgraded their facilities and issued a number of new regulations to improve their services. And that is the highlights of the economic news during the past week. Up next in our crosstalk, we'll listen to the ambassador to the EU in Vietnam talk about the golden opportunities brought about by the ratification of the EVFTA.
In October 2010, the Vietnamese Prime Minister and the European Union President agreed to start negotiations on the EVFTA. In June 2012, the two sides officially announced the launch of the negotiations. On December 1, 2015, EVFTA negotiations officially concluded after 14 rounds. On June 26, 2018, the initial EVFTA was divided into two agreements, the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement and the EU-Vietnam Investment Protection Agreement. The legal review process of the agreements were officially concluded. On June 30, 2019, the two agreements were signed in Hanoi. On January 21, 2020, the European Parliament's Committee on International Trade Commission voted to approve the ratification of the EVFTA and the EVIPA. On February 12, 2020, the European Parliament ratified the agreements.
On February the 12th, the European Parliament, or EP, officially ratified the European Union-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, or EVFTA, and the EU-Vietnam Investment Protection Agreement, or EVIPA. After nearly 10 years of negotiations, the EP's ratification of the deal and its adoption by the Vietnamese National Assembly during the next session is seen as a milestone in the Vietnamese economy's progress of reform and global integration. To understand more about the efforts of both sides in negotiating the deal, how significant the impact it will have on Vietnam's economy, and most importantly, what is the next step for both sides, we are very honored to have in our studio here today, head of the delegation of the European Union to Vietnam, Ambassador Pierre Giorgio Aliberti.
Thank you so much.
Ambassador, welcome to this line.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be here. It's a privilege. I'm very happy to be here.
We just watched a clip reviewing the journey of 10 years of negotiations for the deal. Just right before our talk today, Deputy Head of the negotiating delegations of Vietnam for the EVFTA, Lương Hoàng Thái, also sat with us and shared his view that the negotiations were tough, but actually the ending of negotiations were even tougher. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I agree with him. I think it's as usual, the negotiations have become harder and harder the more you get closer to it. And this was a very important agreement, and actually it's probably the most advanced agreement we have with any developing countries. We are very happy. I was personally very happy, of course, when I knew of the vote of the European Parliament. The fact that we have 63% of the vote of the European Parliament in favor of FTA, 62% in favor of VIPA, of course, gives us a lot of encouragement to continue down this line.
Yeah.
I think it's a very substantial majority, and it shows that basically there is an acknowledgement, a recognition of the reform efforts taken by the government. There's also trust in the future continuation of this reform path.
The negotiations were tough. However, the ratification of the negotiations was even tougher, as we mentioned, because the European Parliament have different views about different matters such as human rights, labor law, and the environment. So what do you think Vietnam has demonstrated to persuade the EP that, yes, Vietnam is ready to fulfill its commitment in this deal?
First of all, there was a very consistent message coming from all Vietnamese authorities, from the top leaders of the country, about the willingness to go down that line. And the second important element, I think, it's also the development of the Vietnamese economy. Because, of course, when you have this kind of agreements, you have to consider the differences in the economy on the two sides. If you look at some numbers, about 20 years ago, Vietnam was exporting basically crude oil for $2 billion US. After 10 years, Vietnam was exporting more in terms of labor-intensive goods such as footwear or textile and garment. Now, in 2019, you have computer and electronics for $50 billion US, smartphone for $14 billion US. So it's a completely new change, a new country, new economy.
So it's the joint efforts of both the political system and the economy itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, as I said before, it was also an acknowledgement of the reform efforts that had been done by the government, and the trust that the reform will continue. This is very important as well.
So with that ratification, what positive impacts do you think it will bring to the development of the Vietnam's economy?
With FTAs, usually we have a number of tangible benefits and some other intangible benefits. The tangible benefits are very clear. First of all, there is an improved access to the market. This means that from day one, there will be no tariffs on 71% of the export of Vietnam, and across 7 years, it will be up to 99% of products from Vietnam will enter the European Union market without any kind of tariff. This will mean a boost in bilateral trade, that's for sure. There have been some studies, they say about 18% more export from Vietnam probably in the next 15 years. They say about 15 billion a year more of export. It's difficult to quantify, but I think this gives you just an idea of the relevance of this. You have also non-tariff barriers, which are also important, for instance, in terms of government procurement or intellectual property rights or geographical indication. This is our important element as well that will favor a boost in bilateral trade. But maybe even more important, you have some intangible benefits which are more difficult to quantify, but I think that will change the fabric of the Vietnamese economy. And I'm referring to the possibility of creating a new wave of foreign direct investment coming from Europe. And not only, because when you create a better enabling environment for business, it will not be just for European Union to come here, but it will be also other foreign countries coming. But even more important, I think it will help also develop more entrepreneurship here in the country. So it gives a better situation for young entrepreneurs to create small and medium-sized enterprises. Will give a lot of jobs. If you think that every year in the market, basically in the job markets, you need 1.2, 1.5 million for the youth coming into the market, to the labor market. This will be very helpful, for the government to have the situation with more investment in creation of jobs. So this is a whole complex situation, but I think we'll have a lot of very concrete improvement in terms of Vietnamese economy. And this is a process we're going to do together. So I think we will accompany you through the process, but this is very clear.
Once the agreement comes into effect, exports to the EU will increase by up to 20%. It will create new opportunities for Vietnam's agriculture sector, as 90% of its strategic commodities, such as coffee, seafood, wood and wood products entering the market will enjoy a zero tax rate. However, the agriculture sector still needs to promote the adoption of free trade agreements.
Để làm sao bạn thấy rằng là Việt Nam rất tích cực trong việc tổ chức khắc phục cái khuyến nghị ILO của bạn. Đó là cái điểm thứ nhất. Cái điểm thứ hai là về lĩnh vực EVFTA, tức là về cái gỗ, hiệp định thương mại tự do về gỗ với bạn, thì chúng ta sẽ tổ chức chương trình hành động để thực hiện khi mà chúng ta đã thực hiện cái nghị định được hơn năm. Làm sao có được những kết quả ban đầu để bạn thấy rằng là Việt Nam quyết tâm không chỉ ký các hiệp định, các nghị định mà quyết tâm ở trong tổ chức thực hiện hành động.
The EVFTA will eliminate 85.6% of tariff lines, which is equivalent to 70.3% of Vietnam's exports to the EU. After 7 years of implementation, 99.2% of the tariff lines and 99.7% of Vietnam's exports will be duty-free.
What do we expect to see in the coming time? For example, investments from the European companies.
Yeah, well, to be honest, we have to say the EVFTA should have entered into force already in a few months, hopefully in summer. On the investment protection agreement, we need more time because you have all the member states' parliament that will have to approve it. But we have to remember that 21 member states have already bilateral agreement with Vietnam. What I was mentioning before, it's the idea that with the FTA in place, there will be changes to the situation in the economy. There will be different rules. We expect to have better, more transparent rules, more predictable procedures. This will help creating a better environment, and investment will come. So investors, they have to see how is the situation on the ground. They have to understand, they have to know that it's predictable, that the rules do not change, they will be treated equally. It's a quality change, it's not just a quantity change, so it needs more time. We have to remember that this is for the people.
Right.
And one thing I didn't mention before, but it's important as well, also for Vietnamese consumers, of course, there will be a positive solution because they will have cheaper European goods coming from in a few months. So, nice stuff, fashion, cosmetics, whatever, they will be cheaper.
How important is the Vietnamese market to the EU? Because Vietnam is the second country that have this high quality kind of deal with the EU, just after Singapore. How important is Vietnam to the EU in terms of economic strategy in the ASEAN?
This is a very good question. And as you rightly said, only Singapore has one, and it just entered into force a few months ago. First of all, Vietnam is a very important country. I think ranks 15 in numbers of people, 100 million people, and a rising middle class. GDP per capita and purchasing power parity about $7,500 per year. So it's quite relevant, and we see huge opportunities. This fact, coupled with a commitment by the government, made us realize that this was a good opportunity to go ahead. Geographical, so location also is important, of course, of Vietnam. Open economy. These are all elements that were very important in attracting the European Union and in considering making us consider that Vietnam was a perfect candidate to go ahead down that line. And the government was very committed, has been very committed on international and multilateral trade, as it's part also the CPTPP and many other free trade agreements. And so this is a clear line, a policy line, which we completely share because we need multilateral trade. So let me add that Vietnam has a really great opportunity right now to become a regional production hub, because you see Vietnam having very favorable condition to export to the European Union, and it will be different from the other countries of the area. So there will be a lot of incentives for other business to come over here to make the products here and to export to the European Union.
What is the expectation of the EU in this agreement with Vietnam, if everything is on track?
Well, the expectation, as I said, is this should happen hopefully in the next few months. Of course, you have a National Assembly first to approve it, and formally also the Council, European Council, has to approve it. But in a few months' time, so probably by the beginning of the summer, we should have this agreement in place. And so from the beginning, we'll see, and from the entry into force, a reduction, very strong reduction about the tariffs, most of the tariffs, 65 on one side, 71% on the other. And this will be clear impact in terms of how the trade will be done. We can learn from similar agreements in other countries, and we saw that since the beginning there are very important increase in terms of the trade exchange. Now we have trade exchange about 50 billion, US dollars, so we can expect this number to grow very, very rapidly. But as I said before, the most important thing, what we expect is to have a new era of partnership with Vietnam. So it's not too much on the quantity I'm focusing on, it's on the quality of the relationship. And our approach, and my personal approach, is always very clear. We're never here to teach any lesson. We are here to share experience. I mean, we have our own problems. We did something good, something bad, but you know, we are humans, so we try a way ahead. We have some experience in a number of fields, and we try to share it with partners like Vietnam.
Right.
They want to work with us.
Right. So it's like sharing the competitive advantage.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. We are different, you know, culture, different history, different economies,
Right.
and we can work together. And that's the basis, as you said, of competitive advantage, the basis of international trade. So
Yeah.
that's
And
why.
together to create a win-win situation.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely,
Yes.
for real.
At this factory, the old air conditioning system has been replaced with an advanced one with air filters. Automated vacuum cleaners operate continuously. This makes the atmosphere in the factory cooler. Although this business had to invest a lot of money in this improvement, its productivity is higher.
Mà muốn làm được điều đó thì đời sống của lao động phải được quan tâm. Nhưng quan tâm thì phải tốn tiền. Thế cho nên về cái việc đó tôi cho rằng là FTA là đáp ứng tốt cho cái việc phát triển.
With the EU Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, Vietnam must commit to manufacturing its products in factories with a good, friendly working environment. As a member country of the International Labour Organization, or ILO, Vietnam has so far ratified 6 of the ILO's 8 basic conventions.
So we really believe that labor law compliance and social dialogue help competitiveness. And this European-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement provides the framework for that. And it also shows that the government is really supporting that.
Along with the commitments on labor content, Vietnam continues to show the highest enforcement capacity for environmental issues and sustainable development. These are beneficial commitments for competitive industry of Vietnam such as textiles, agriculture, fishery and forestry.
Một số những cái đòi hỏi rất cao về cái môi trường, vấn đề về môi trường, nhất là đảm bảo cái phát triển bền vững, hay là điều kiện của người lao động và vân vân nữa, thì cũng đều hàm chứa những yếu tố tích cực nếu xét về góc độ lâu dài trong cái tái cơ cấu lại nền kinh tế cũng như cải cách về trong cái quản lý nhà nước và cải cách về pháp luật của chúng ta. Và chắc chắn nó sẽ tạo ra những cái động lực mới cho tăng trưởng.
The Ministry of Industry and Trade is developing a government's action plan to restructure strong economic sectors and implement reforms to complete the legal framework based on integration commitments.
So now I want to ask about your recommendations or advice for Vietnamese enterprises who want to enter the European markets, because it is a very high standard, very strict market.
Sure. Well, I think they have to abide by high standards, so they have to be very careful about whether their product, for instance, on the agricultural side, they have to know that the standards on sanitary and phytosanitary rules are very high. So they have to get more information about how to improve their products, because if they want to enter the market, they have to be extremely solid. There are huge opportunities, and they are managing already very well, because if you look at numbers, Vietnamese companies fare pretty well, even in this situation right now. But I think if they want to really do the leap forward, they need to improve in terms of quality.
Do you think a little bit of competition will also help?
Oh, I think so. So Vietnamese company up to now, we can see that we are very confident about the future, because even without this specific agreement, they managed pretty well. So we had a huge deficit on our side in Europe. So you had a really impressive growth of Vietnamese exports in recent years. So I'm pretty sure they will do very well.
As you mentioned, all of the tariffs will be gone pretty soon when the deal is implemented. Then what will happen when tariff no longer matters? What will we see?
Well, we'll see the competition will be based not so much on price, yes, because in the sense that with the tariffs, of course, there is a distortion, because if it's a good just because of a tariff change the price, of course, things are different. But the issue will be that there will be more concrete and more real competition, because of course it will be the product, it will be up to the consumers to decide what to choose. And so in a way, this is a way of how to improve also your production, because if a product coming from Europe, and which is, I don't know, a very good, top quality, say, textile or something like that, or gammon, some product, and it is able to enter the market here, locally produced, organization will have to manage to change the price, to find better way of production, and so to improve their ability to produce. So I think this will improve the situation and will create stronger companies, so a stronger economic fabric to Vietnam. So in a way, some maybe of them will be out of this specific market, they will manage to go to other markets, but altogether I think we'll be reinforcing the economy here, will be reinforcing the companies, will create jobs at the end. So I think this is very important, so also results from economic perspective, also from a political perspective. Yeah.
And again, it goes back to your keywords of today's talk, quality.
Quality, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I'm very encouraged by what I see. And of course, I'm very lucky because I just arrived in a very good moment, because of course this agreement will bring us to a new level of relationship. And we are ready, of course, to go down that line together. So we have to go in a partnership. We can do many things together, but I'm very positive and I'm very excited about this journey.
Thank you so much.
Sinkamon, thank you so much.
It is worth mentioning that this is the first agreement the EU has signed with a developing country, and also the first agreement that the new parliament of the EU has ratified. Vietnam overcoming these very difficult stages to achieve success is a very memorable event, particularly in the context of increasing trade protection movements in the world. Thanks to our discussion today, we have understood more about how the EU view Vietnam's efforts in fulfilling its commitments in the EVFTA and cooperating with the EU to bring more economic benefits to both sides. Negotiations ended, and now it is the time for implementation and execution. With determination and actions, we believe that opportunities are to be seized and challenges should be overcome. And that has wrapped up this edition of BizLine. Thank you very much for watching. To rewatch our program, you can log on to our website at vtv4.vtv.vn or tune in our YouTube channel at youtube.com/vtv4go. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.